If you know anything about Vikings other than that they raided European towns and monasteries from the late 8th century, then it is thanks in large part to the rich tradition of medieval Icelandic literature, especially the sagas. The Icelandic noun saga is from the verb segja, meaning to speak or to say, because in olden times, the only evening entertainment in Iceland, especially during the long harsh winter, was to gather around the fire and listen to someone reciting or reading the ancient stories of the land and the people, the sagas. In the written form they survive today, the 40 or so Icelandic sagas are a product of the 13th and 14th centuries when they were put to paper, but they are mostly set in the Viking period between the settling of Iceland in the 9th century up until the 11th century, and this is when many of the stories were originally composed in oral form. While the rest of literate Europe was obsessed with medieval romance, such as the stories of King Arthur, Iceland had preserved a unique type of literature derived from native oral traditions. They are mostly realistic accounts of events, with a typically Nordic style of laconic prose, which avoids flowery language but subtly alludes to events which it does not mention directly. The themes are those which concerned men of the Viking Age: honour, vengeance, blood feuds, paganism and Christianity, love and loss. Some sagas focus on a single region of Iceland in one lifetime, while others span centuries and can describe the passing of decades of history in a single paragraph. Although sagas influenced English literature as far back as Shakespeare, their popularity in the English-speaking world owes a debt to the work of the famous Victorian English artist and designer, William Morris, who translated several major sagas into English for the first time. He translated the Völsunga saga in 1870, 4 years before Richard Wagner completed his great opera, Der Ring des Nibelungen, which was based on the same story and catapulted it into international fame. Morris not only translated the sagas, but he also travelled twice to Iceland, where he rode across the otherworldly interior on a little Icelandic horse of the ancient Viking breed.
Welcome to Iceland.
My name is Tom Rousel. I am an historian, and my family is connected to William Morris via the marriage of his nephew Lionel Morris, so I was raised to feel I had some connection to him. And I also studied the sagas and other medieval Icelandic literature during my master's degree at UCL. It was upon graduating in 2012 that I wrote on my bucket list that I would ride an Icelandic horse in that volcanic land, just like Morris and the saga heroes before him. In this film, I'm hoping that, like William Morris, I will somehow gain a new insight into these ancient stories by experiencing the harsh land itself, and by meeting the natives and finding out how the violent heroes of the Viking Age remain relevant to them in 2025.
Let's find out how people lived in the days of the Icelandic sagas.
I was greeted at the airport by the crew working with me on this film, led by Matt, who runs the North Hugr channel. Our journey begins in the modern and rather trendy city of Reykjavik, which is appropriate since it was one of the first places settled by the Icelanders. The first few people to arrive in the early 9th century mostly came here by mistake, but the first to intentionally sail to Iceland was Raven Floki Vilgerðarsson of Rogaland in Norway. He landed in 868 after finding the island with the help of ravens, which naturally flew in the direction of land when released. He landed near Reykjavik and had a good summer, but was devastated by the terrible winter, which prompted him to name the place Iceland. He returned to Norway and spoke ill of the place, but nevertheless he ended up coming back and spent the rest of his life here. The next important settler came in 870, Ingolf Arnason, a devout Norwegian heathen who sailed with his wife Halveig and a man called Hjörleifr, after all of them lost their lands in the old country. The process of settlement was imbued with pagan holy rituals, such that when land was sighted, Ingolf threw overboard the pillars from his high seat, a throne which distinguished his rank above other men, and he promised to settle wherever the gods brought the pillars ashore. The scholar of religion, Mircea Eliade, wrote of the settlement, When the Scandinavian colonists took possession of Iceland and cleared it, they regarded the enterprise neither as an original undertaking nor as human and profane work. For them, their labour was only repetition of a primordial act, the transformation of chaos into cosmos, by the divine act of creation. When they tilled the desert soil, they were in fact repeating the act of the gods who had organised chaos by giving it a structure, forms and norms. These sacred pillars, called Unvegisulur, were discovered by Ingolf's slaves 3 years later, and Ingolf named the place Reykjavik. His shipmate, Hjörleifr, who did not observe the pagan traditions, was murdered by his Christian Irish slaves. So Ingolf hunted them down and killed them on some islands off the coast, which have since been known as the Westman Islands, Westman being a Norse name for the Irish. Ingolf is now immortalised in this sculpture by Einar Jónsson, erected in the city centre in 1924. He stands proud and resolute, staring out at new lands, a personification of the Nordic spirit of courageous adventure. He is also on this pub sign too, so it would be disrespectful of his memory not to take a look inside. We know a lot about the early settlers not only from archaeology and from the sagas, but from the 10th century Landnámabók and 12th century Íslendingabók. This is a manuscript of the latter, copied out in the 17th century. Icelanders never forgot their origins, and many know their family pedigrees all the way back to the first settlers. The legacy of this heritage is visible all around the streets of the city, mostly in the form of corny Viking kitsch for the tourists. But how do the Icelanders themselves feel about it?
It's gonna be called Sif, souvenirs, and I do the carving in the stones, and I'm washing the stones and making rune sets for prophecy.
You're a rune...
I'm a witch.
A witch, a vulva. Yeah. Or a...
Yeah, a valva.
Yeah. Are you an Asatruar as well?
Yes, I am. We are in Ásatrúarfélagið, the whole family. Like the Nordic mythology teaches us a lot about respect and honor in the society, and we should look more to that. It's very traditional to read Icelandic ghost stories. We have a huge tradition in that manner, and we tell ghost stories also. And of course, we are obsessed with elves, and the whole nation believes in elves. And we're highly spiritual people, but we're not that religious.
Do you know people who have left offerings out for the dwarves or the elves?
Yes, yes, and also for the hidden people.
Yeah.
We also have the hidden people.
Is it something people will do, but they don't like to talk about it?
Probably. Probably think they're cuckoo.
Did either of you read Icelandic sagas back in school?
Yeah. We need to do it in like Icelandic.
Yeah, it's part of the curriculum to read the sagas.
And you think that's right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's important to know your background, or your culture and your heritage, I guess.
Do you have a favorite character or anything from a saga?
Of course, Sif, because my name is Erna, which is a female eagle, and Sif is, of course, the wife of Thor, the thunder god, and she was the goddess of weeds, and she's my favorite character, of course. My name is Erna Sif.
Yeah, I read the Egilssaga, it's called, in school.
Snorra Saga, Leifsaga, yeah.
Did you enjoy them?
They're hard to read because
It's
the
vocabulary in the books
vocabulary.
are really old-fashioned Icelandic. But it's really interesting to read old Icelandic and learn more about that, Yeah, about our ancestors.
Yeah.
Sort of like that. Yeah.
But what about the people? Do you think they were hard to get your heads around? Did they seem foreign to a modern Icelander?
Today, yeah.
Yeah.
They were really old school.
They were like killing each other if they stole their sheep or something. It was very brutal then.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah. It was really brutal and just old-fashioned.
Those were extremely barbaric times. where killing was a daily bread. It's very nice that we didn't take that with us into the modern society.
There's been a debate in Iceland if they're like too violent or we are like upholding these chaotic and like brutal characters. I mean, they're beautiful sagas and you know they're a part of our history, but some of them are really, really brutal and really portray evil characters as heroes in some sort of way.
Like Egill, maybe.
Yeah, exactly.
And Grettir.
You don't like Grettir the Strong?
I like him, but you know, I don't really relate to him as a person.
You wouldn't like him if you met him in a pub.
But I think you'd run away if you met them in a pub. I mean, they're known for just drinking alcohol and going barbaric, you know, back in the sagas, I think.
Like modern English people. So, are the sagas still relevant to Icelandic people?
Not the boring parts, you know. But you know, it's good to have those kind of books today to see like our ancestors, to see
what it was like, because it's story that's been traveling from people for many years, and when the paper came they all wrote it down, so it's not like exactly how it was but how their stories went on, you know.
You have to know your story to be able to go forward.
If you have children one day, will you encourage them to read it?
Yeah, they will probably say it's boring and hard to read, but it's worth it when you finish the book.
Yeah, I would just the same answer, yeah.
Yeah.
Before we left Reykjavik, we visited the most quintessentially Viking kitsch place of them all. The Viking Hotel, Fjörukráin. There we enjoyed a sumptuous banquet fit for a jarl. But what really excited me were the mythological scenes depicted in the style of Viking-era tapestries, such as the one found in the Oseberg ship burial in Norway. 30 miles east of Reykjavik is a national park of stunning natural beauty called Þingvellir, in which the world's oldest continuous parliament was founded in the year 930. Germanic heathens held semi-religious gatherings called things, which functioned also as a court for legal proceedings. In Iceland, these occurred all over the country and were overseen by local priests known as Guðar, who doubled up as chieftains and lawyers, since there weren't so many people about in Iceland and there was no king to govern everyone. Once a year in the summer, 36 of the Guðar from around the country, along with their advisors and servants, would gather for a national parliament called the Althing, here amidst the volcanic landscape, next to the fault line between the North American and European tectonic plates. They would camp out for a fortnight while all the national issues were heard, discussed and resolved beneath the law rock they called Lögberg. They were united only by the law. The earliest law code is said to have been brought to Iceland by a man named Ulfljótur from Norway. The first National Assembly was held in 930 and continued to be held here right up until 1798. It was later re-established in Reykjavik, where it still constitutes the national parliament, but inside a nice building where it's warm.
Valhall, 400 meters. I don't know what that means exactly. Oh. There is a road and it leads to Valhalla. It's 400 meters over there. My brothers, we have made it. We are so close. Finally.
This is a very beautiful place. The whole area was camped out by the settlers from all over Iceland, would come here to convene once a year for the grand Thing meeting. This waterfall is known as the Waterfall of Axe River, so named because one of the early settlers of Iceland, in the ancient Germanic custom of heathens, threw a weapon into the river, an axe in this case, and thereafter it was known as the Axe River. And this waterfall is right next to the Althing site, just over those rocks over there. It's a popular tourist destination today, not so much because of the history, but because photography and appealing landscape. So it's quite busy. But it's evidently a holy place because the river has been loaded with weapons. And even as to the rivers of the other world, they're said to be weapon-loaded rivers, for the heathen must consecrate rivers with the offering of a weapon.
Another interesting piece of folklore about Uxarau, the Axe River, is that it was said to have prophetic powers for the year ahead. At midnight, on New Year's Eve, it would run red with either wine or blood, with the former promising prosperity and the latter warning of war.
In Roman times, Tacitus says that the Germanic people punished an adulteress with drowning her in a bog, putting a weight on her back, or a hurdle on her back. In the heathen Iceland times, they seem to soften a bit, and the adulteresses merely had their head shaved and were flogged. The heathens would meet here for law and punishment at the Thingvellir, and after the conversion to Christianity, it remained a place where judgment was given and punishments were dished out. Men, for certain crimes like murder, were executed in Christian times by beheading, but women were drowned. So it seems like they're going back to drowning women. So some adulteresses could be drowned, and this place here is one of the places that a woman could be drowned as a punishment in the Christian times. In 13th century, around the times the sagas were written down. But I don't think the heathens were drowning women in that particular way just prior to Christianization in Iceland.
This place is also important for the story of how Iceland became Christian. The arrival of Christianity caused religious tensions in Iceland. A young poet named Hjalti Skegjason was knocking about with an old Christian called Gissur the White. One of Hjalti's poems illegally blasphemed against the holy gods, Odin and Freya, and so he was sentenced at the Thing to outlawry. At the next Althing, in the year 1000, a mob of Christians came to the Law Rock and renounced the ancient laws, demanding their own Christian law speaker called Hall of Cedar. Íslendingabók states that a heathen Gothi named Þorgeir Ljósvetningagoði was the law speaker, and he pondered on the matter of the new religion and the old by laying beneath a fur blanket for a very long time and meditating. Now, Western Iceland at the time got a lot of money from trading walrus and narwhal ivory from Greenland with the Christian kingdoms on the continent. And money talks. It is specifically stated that money changed hands between Hall of Cedar and Þorgeir, and many believe this was a bribe. In any case, Þorgeir prevented a great battle between the heathens and the Christians when he spoke to the Althing, saying, "We cannot live in a divided land. There will never be peace unless we have a single law. I ask you all, heathens and Christians alike, to accept the one law that I am about to proclaim. Our first principle of law is that all Icelanders shall henceforth be Christian. We shall believe in one God, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. We shall renounce the worship of idols. We shall no longer expose unwanted children. We shall no longer eat horse meat. Anyone who does these things openly shall be punished with outlawry, but no punishment will follow if they are done in private." Þorgeir later threw his idols of the gods into the Goðafoss waterfall in the north of the country. Paganism did continue in private for a while after, and today, Icelanders still eat horse meat. And some of them worship the old gods just like I do. Even in the days of the sagas, not all of the Christians were so committed to the new faith. A large, strong man named Bróðir in Njál's saga was an ordained deacon. But he cast aside the foreign cult and resumed sacrificing to the ancient gods of his forefathers. With the power of heathen magic, he also required enchanted armor that no weapon could harm. Next, it is time, after 13 years, to finally cross horse riding in Iceland off my bucket list. The horse was the most important animal in the heathen religion. Icelandic horse fights were an ancient sport that continued here into the 13th century, with parallel associated skird rituals in Scandinavia continuing to the 19th century. Horse sacrifices are a definitive feature of nearly all Indo-European religions going back over 5,000 years, and this continued here in Iceland. This is a high-status male Viking burial which contained a horse sacrifice. The Icelandic horse itself is a hardy breed, which descends from Norwegian and British horses which the Vikings brought with them in the 9th and the 10th centuries. It has a unique kind of gait called toot, which geneticists have shown originated in Anglo-Saxon horses from early medieval times.
Here I am, fulfilling my bucket list wish from 2012 that I would ride on Icelandic ponies in Iceland. Now I'm on this fine gelding called Reinja. There be dragons. I could live in there. Better than a flat in London.
And a new study has demonstrated that European ponies like the Icelandic horse and Shetland pony also have origins in Asian Siberian breeds, which were especially adapted for the cold. The continuing affinity Iceland has for horses and for horse meat is a living inheritance from the Viking Age. But there are more modern ways to experience the landscape of the sagas. We headed to the south to climb the Murdalsjökull glacier. After getting suited and booted, we climbed aboard this giant snow truck to reach our snowmobiles.
We've got some beautiful views out here. It's Thule, the mythical land.
That night, I updated my bucket list.
So here's my bucket list from 2012 till death. And the fourth thing on the list, Iceland horse riding.
And I tried another local delicacy.
Everyone says I read the nostril is the softest part. Did you see that bird? Yeah, very tender.
From the south, we headed north to see some important places from the sagas. But we found time to enjoy the scenery on the way.
Just below the surface is always frozen. There are vast, undeveloped acres of forest. There are cold rivers. Men had to cut the road through
The sagas do not contain romantic descriptions of the landscape. It was not the Norse way to be sentimental about mountains, waterfalls, and glaciers like modern people are.
rugged country. There are magnificent mountain ranges.
But there is one notable exception. In the Alsaga, the typical Viking hero, Gunnar, is about to escape from the men of Gissur the White, who are out to kill him. But he looks back to his farm at Hlíðarendi and is so moved by its beauty that he decides to stay and meet his fate. He then spoke this final iconic verse. Föger liven, svo att mer heffir hon aldrig offen föger synst. Bleker akra enslegen tun. Och mun grida hem after och fara ferge. We travelled onward in the comfort of a heated four-wheel drive, whereas the men of the sagas had to get about on foot or horse. One of the ways they warmed themselves up and soothed their aching muscles was with the abundance of natural volcanic hot springs. I had to experience one of these myself, so we embarked upon the mountain trail leading to the hot river at Reykjadalur. The conditions at this time of year are not ideal. We made it to the top, but then we had difficulty finding any hot water.
I've been hiking for ages up to the top of a hill here in Iceland to find a hot spring bath. I've never had one before, but I found some hot springs. They're boiling. It'll take the skin off you. The water here is freezing cold snowmelt, and there's no lagom perfect temperature place to bathe, so stinks of sulfur. I don't know where I'm supposed to have a bath. There isn't a hot bath. Maybe it's not possible at this time of year.
Put your hand here. This is really, yeah, this is really good.
Okay, we found the spot. We found the perfect spot. It's lagom.
Yeah, you're
This
just
is the life.
now we
We
need.
forgot the beers.
I got one.
We just
Yes.
we go in the bog. We go in the bog like the ancient Britons and the Roman shop, and then
This is what Caesar saw when he arrived in Britain.
Cheers, mate.
Suitably refreshed, we pushed further north to the Breiðafjörður. Real saga country. This is where the Vikings, who discovered the New World, were bred. Our cosy log cabin was appropriately Nordic. The next morning, we were eager to explore Western Iceland, the land of Leif Erikson, who discovered America. First, we hiked through the snow to another hot spring bath. The changing room is built to resemble Viking-age turf houses from here in Iceland. The gables form two wolf heads, likely to represent the two wolfhounds of Odin, Freki and Geri. This particular hot spring at Laugar in Dalasusla in northwest Iceland is featured in the Laxdala saga, where a girl named Guthrun uses it, so now it is called Guthrunarlaug.
Some runes. I think that there's just lines. I think they gave up whatever they were going to start writing. Just like in the olden days when they came back and they wanted to warm themselves, they had bar houses just like this. In Urbygja saga, a man builds a special bathhouse, and then he wants to get rid of two berserkers from Sweden who are becoming a pest on the Snæfellsnes Peninsula just near here, and he tricks them to come into the bathhouse, and then they start pouring lots of hot water in to make the Swedes overheat to try and kill them. But the Swedes are so strong that they smashed their way out the door, and then the Icelanders just stabbed them to death, and that was the end of the berserkers.
Fortunately, I escaped this bath unharmed, if a bit chilly. "15 miles southeast of the bath, we found the beautiful valley in which Eirik the Red once lived. He established the first European settlement in Greenland, even before the Inuit arrived there. The foundations of a Viking-age longhouse, presumed to be his, were found here, and this modern replica was built right next to it. it closely resembles the foundations of Viking longhouses seen in Shetland, such as Jarlshof, and earlier ones in Norway. This is also a modern replica in Avaldsnes. The main difference is that in Iceland turf roofs are preferred, as it is a great insulator and wood is scarce up here. Such halls were where the local lords lived, and they entertained guests, drinking mead and singing ancient songs.
Any answers?
I was home. But I am an honored guest. My lord, it is your responsibility to provide me with food and shelter. Rude Icelanders.
I encountered a great many charming turf roof buildings around the country. Most are used as sheep shelters these days. Eirik's son, Leif, who was also raised in this valley, followed in his father's footsteps as an explorer and went on to discover North America nearly 500 years before Columbus discovered the Caribbean islands. Leif named it Vinland. This grand statue of him stands in front of the cathedral in Reykjavik. There are plenty of monuments to him in Canada and the USA too, including this one in Brooklyn, New York City, erected in 1939. Leif's sister, Freydis, was also quite heroic. When attacked by Native Americans, she scared them away by striking her own breasts with a sword. The men of the sagas are not only relevant to Icelanders, but to people all over the world, particularly in North America. The next morning, we were up early and prepared for a sacred mission to one of the holiest parts of Iceland, the history of which is contained in Eyrbyggja saga. The weather was terrible as we drove westward along the Snæfellsnes Peninsula. The wind was especially harsh as we crossed Alftafjörður, a region the saga relates was haunted by the troll-like ghosts of a revenant draugr named Thorolf Lamefoot. In life, he had been a difficult man who quarrelled with neighbours, calling on his slaves to steal hay and burn houses. He even initiated a legal dispute with his own son. He died while seething with hatred, and this caused him to return from the dead in a troll-like way, haunting and killing locals. This only stopped when he was exhumed, then brought to the headland in this fjord named after him, Bæfothöfði, Lamefoot's headland, where he was burned. But even then, his ashes caused a cow to give birth to a troll bull that killed its owner. It was exactly above Bæfothöfði that we passed these Indian tourists who had broken down in the storm. No doubt the work of Thorolf Lamefoot.
Up on the northwest of Iceland is the Snæfellsnes Peninsula, and on a small peninsula from that is Thor's Peninsula, Thorsnes. And it's so named because one of the early settlers, named Thorolf Mosterbeard, put his Óðnsvegisúlur, which is the sacred pillars of the high seat, into the water as he approached the area, and said that wherever they landed, he would settle. It's all detailed in this saga, Eyrbyggja saga, which is a saga concerned with events of this area from the time of the early settlers onwards.
The method which Thorolf Mosterbeard employed is exactly the same one Ingolf had employed 10 years earlier. But in this case, we know that Thorolf was especially dedicated to the god Thor.
His pillars landed just over here at Thorsnes, and he then built a temple to Thor and established his home there, carried fire around the area in a sunwise direction to sanctify it. And he also declared that this peculiar hill was holy to the god Thor. The hill is known as Helgafell in Old Norse, in Icelandic Helgafett, and it's still considered holy, and it was even holy in Christian times because there was a church on top of it for a while. It's not there anymore, but there's still a church at the bottom of it. But it features large in Icelandic folklore to this very day because it's believed that when you climb it without speaking and without looking behind you, then you may have 3 wishes when you get to the top. In the time of Thorolfur, he also declared it so holy that no blood could be shed on it, no conflicts were allowed, and that you were not allowed to relieve yourself on it, even during the Thing meetings that occurred on it, and that you may not even look upon it without first washing, which is why I first washed my face and hands in a pious ablution before coming. But I think I shall try to do as he did and climb up, and I have something to ask of Thor, so when I get to the top. Another thing very magical about this hill is that Thorstein the Codbiter, who was the son of Thorolfur, he once saw on the north side of the hill, it opened up, and within it he saw his ancestors feasting in Valhall, and he heard the noises of the party within. So it functions like a barrow in the sense that it is a doorway to the other world, but it's also a natural feature of the landscape, and it just shows just how the Icelanders imbued the natural geology of their newly settled land with the ancient mythology of the Germanic people.
It was actually one of Thorstein's shepherds who saw the hill open to receive Thorstein into the hall of his forefathers. This proved a prophetic vision, for he had been drowned at sea. The motif of the ancestors in the mountain closely resembles a widespread European folkloric trope called the king asleep in the mountain. Such stories depict legendary kings and heroes like King Arthur, Barbarossa, Ogier the Dane, or Finn McCool sleeping inside a mountain with their army, waiting one day to return. Usually a shepherd is the one who discovers them, just as in this story, and many other versions are thought to originate with a story about Odin himself. This Icelandic tradition of climbing the hill in total silence closely resembles a folk custom in Sweden called Orskong, where people take a walk in the woods or a graveyard without speaking or laughing in order to gain oracular visions of the year to come. In Iceland, though, you get 3 wishes from Thor instead of a vision. Clearly both derive from the same heathen custom. The stipulation that one must not look back while climbing the hill also has clear parallels in several ancient Indo-European myths.
Son of Odin, Morty's father, Thunderer! Give me the strength to win in my coming fight 1 month from now! May your strength be my strength! And may this documentary film be seen by many who will appreciate the holiness of your hill! Hail Thor!
My first wish was that a sick family member would recover, and this was, thankfully, granted. But you're probably wondering about my fight. Well, I lost. Perhaps this is because I relieved myself in a field only 700 meters away from Helgafell. I thought it was far away enough, but perhaps Thor disagreed.
Thorstein, the Codbiter, is the one who saw this open up and saw his ancestors within. But the tradition of being a priest of Thor at the Temple of Thor here at Holy Mountain, Helgafell, continued for long after. Thorstein's son, Thorgrimur, and then his son, Thorgrimur's son, was called Snorri Goði. Goði meaning a priest, because he was also a very pious priest and a very respected man on Snæfellsnes Peninsula, an important character in Eyrbyggja saga. He was considered extremely crafty and clever. He outsmarted most of his enemies, and he always, well, not always, but he usually came out on top, although there were some people who got the better of him at times. But this area, which was owned by the descendants of the original settler, Thorfur Mosterbid, stayed in that family, and they, as priests, were the custodians of it. But some of the neighbours weren't exactly keen on the claim that this was the holiest part of Iceland. In fact, they resented it. And this led to conflict, especially because a meeting called a thing took place here at times, and it had been decreed by the Thorolfur's line that this was such a holy place that you couldn't relieve yourself at it. And as you can imagine, a thing was a meeting. A lot of issues had to be discussed. It could go on a long time, and the bladder might be strained by such an experience. But according to the custom, you were to leave the holy area entirely and go around there to the sea and go across a bit of water to a skerry called Drittskerry, or meaning the dirty skerry, or something ruder, where you were to relieve yourself. Rather a convoluted way to use a lavatory. And of course the neighbours became rather annoyed with all this sort of rigmarole, and one of them declared that he intended to relieve himself wherever he pleased the next thing, and this tensions rose, it escalated, and eventually there was actually armed conflict on Helgafell, and that resulted in blood being shed on this holy place where no blood was to be shed. Now, the consequence of that was that the following thing ruled that it was no longer possible to claim that this was more holy than any other place in Iceland. It's still holy to Thor, of course, but not the most holy place of all, because it had been contaminated. And then, as a result, a new place was designated for the thing, where people would be allowed to relieve themselves as they pleased. But it still remained a holy place, as I say, and today they have built this WC, as you can see, for that very purpose. So you need not worry if you are going to come in here, that you can find a very your conveniences, modern conveniences, before you approach the very holy hill. But do remember to wash yourself before you look at it, because that would be improper.
Although the weather seemed bad, it was actually the calmest in the entire country that day, with everywhere else under a red warning. That very night, the cathedral in Reykjavik was struck by lightning, the only time this has ever been witnessed. Was Thor responding to my prayer? A church stands at the foot of Helgafell now, but the temple of Thor is described in detail in Eyrbyggja saga. It was the main source for the Temple of Odin depicted in the 2022 film The Northman by Robert Eggers. The Örnvegssulur were positioned by the door with sacred nails in them. The center of the temple contained an inner structure containing the Holy of Holies, which had an altar pillar in the center with a silver oath ring and a bowl of sacrificial blood kept on it. All the wooden statues of the gods were positioned in a circle around this altar. It was such a privilege to visit this very holy place and to pray to Thor, just as many did 1,000 years before. Eyrbyggja saga and Bárðr saga also contain many other fascinating supernatural stories about Snæfellsnes, including the main character of the latter, who in death becomes a local god of the mountain to whom the locals pray. And in the former, there is the story of a Christian woman from the Hebrides who brings cursed English bedsheets with her to Iceland, which cause it to rain blood, and for a ghost seal to surface from a stone hearth as though it were the sea. But we don't have time for all that. Instead, we must head south to Borgarnes to learn about perhaps the most beloved saga character of all. One of the most intriguing characters in all saga literature is Egil Skallagrimsson. His saga is tragic, comic, brutal and touching, and Egil himself far more closely resembles the complicated anti-heroes of modern novels than anything from ancient heroic legends. Most of his story is told in the region of Borgarnes, north of Reykjavik, where Egil's father Skallagrimur Kveldulfsson first established a farm here called Borg. The whole region is indebted to Egil's saga, with many places named after events from the book. His story begins with his Norwegian grandfather Kveldulf, who was a shapeshifter. One of Odin's Ulfheithnar, those who wear wolf hides, and his name, Kveldulf, means night wolf, because at evening he would transform into a fierce creature who it was unwise to approach. Kveldulf's mother was half troll, which in this context means half Sami. His opposition to King Harald of Norway resulted in him and his son Skallagrim having to flee the fjords of western Norway for Iceland. Kveldulf died en route, exhausted by the power of his Odinic berserker rage, but he first commanded his coffin be thrown overboard and that the people settle wherever it came ashore. It landed near Borgarnes, and his son buried him there. Skallagrim is an Odinic name. Grim means mask and pertains to Odin's cult, while Skalla means bald, in reference to the fact Skallagrim was an ugly man who went bald from an early age. He and his wife, Bera, had 2 children who survived infancy. The first was tall, strong, cheerful and handsome, the image of a Nordic hero. His name was Thorolf. Their second son was named Egil, and he turned out, like his father, to be ugly and dark. But by the age of 3, Egil was as strong as a 7-year-old, and was gifted by Odin with a poetic skill such that he composed his first verse as a toddler. He was still a child when he spoke the following famous verse, which is the basis of a viral TikTok song. My mother said I would be bought a boat with fine oars, set off with Vikings, stand upon the prow, command the precious craft, then enter port, kill a man and another. One winter, Egil and his friend were playing a rough game against Egil's father, which they were winning, but like Kveldulf before him, Skallagrim became more powerful as the sun was setting, and at this point he threw Egil's friend to the ground so hard that he was killed. Then he seized his own son and would have killed him too, were it not for the slave woman called Brok, who had fostered Egil as a child. She intervened, pleading with Skallagrim, who let Egil go only to attack her instead. She ran as fast as she could to the end of the Ness and jumped into the Sound. As she was swimming away, Skallagrim heaved up a huge boulder and threw it directly onto Brok, such that she was drowned and never seen again. The Sound is now named Braukersund in her honour.
Anyone who's interested in Icelandic literature or want to know about sagas should know about Egil Skallagrimsson, because he's very much an Odinist. He knows how to write runes and use magical runes and how to send bad luck to people and to command spirits to harm people. So he's a wizard, but he's also a powerful warrior. Egil had somewhat of a tragic life. His father, Skallagrim, was kind of like a werewolf, and he was an abusive father. Nevertheless, he respected his father, and this is a barrow for his father, Skallagrim. But it doesn't just contain Egil's father, it also contains Egil's son, Bodvar, who tragically was killed while young. And Egil carried the body of his son to his father's barrow and laid him to rest, laid Bodvar to rest alongside his grandfather, Skallagrim.
And afterwards he mourned his son he stayed alone in his room for a period of time to mourn him. This monument still stands here in the middle of Borgarnes, in this park, for people to admire and remember the characters of the sagas who are ancestral to many Icelanders today, so that they live through modern Icelanders and not just through the sagas.
This touching relief sculpture by Anne-Marie Carl Nielsen depicts the grief-stricken Egil carrying his drowned son Bodvar on horseback to bury him in Skallagrim's barrow. His grief was so great that he isolated himself afterwards and eventually overcame the grief by composing a poem called Sonnatorg, meaning the irreparable loss of sons, in which he laments the death of his two sons, Bodvar and Gunnar. He actually threatens the sea god Eir and his wife Ron, saying, "The sea goddess has ruffled me, stripped me bare of my loved ones. The ocean severed my family's bonds, the tight knot that ties me down. If by sword I might avenge that deed, the brewer of waves would meet his end. Smite the wind's brother that dashes the bay, do battle against the sea god's wife." And despite being a pious devotee of the god Odin, he also expresses resentment towards his god in the verses for his misfortune, while also being grateful for Odin's gift of poetic skill, which helps him to come to terms with his grief. "I was in league with the Lord of Spears, pledged myself loyal to believe in him, before he broke off his friendship with me, the guardian of chariots, architect of victory. I do not worship Vilir's brother, guardian of the gods, through my own longing, though in good ways too the friend of wisdom has granted me redress for affliction. He who does battle and tackles the hell wolf gave me the craft that is beyond reproach, and the nature that I could reveal those who plotted against me as my true enemies." That last line refers to Egil's Odinic ability to identify enemies. He also uses runic magic to curse them. His saga describes how he took a hazel pole and stuck a horse's head on it. He made an invocation of the land wights, saying that none could rest until they had driven his enemies from the land. Then he thrust the pole into the ground and turned the head towards his enemies and carved the invocation in runes upon the pole. The pole of shame is called a Neathstone. Egil's Odinic skill in poetry and battle took him on adventures abroad as well. At one point, he and his handsome brother go to England and serve King Athelstan against the Norse Gael and Scottish alliance at the Battle of Brunanburh. Thorolf is killed, but Egil is richly rewarded. The saga provides an iconic description of Egil's fearsome physical features, while in Athelstan's court, who he intimidates in order to get more money. He was wearing a helmet and laid his sword across his knees, and now and again he would draw it halfway out of the scabbard, then thrust it back in again. He sat upright, but with his head bowed low. Egil had very distinctive features, with a wide forehead, bushy brows, and a nose that was not long but extremely broad. His beard grew over a long, wide part of his face, and his chin and entire jaw were exceptionally broad. With his thick neck and broad shoulders, he stood out from other men. When he was angry, his face grew harsh and fierce. He was well built and taller than other men, with thick wolf-grey hair, although he had gone bald at an early age. When he was sitting in this particular scene, he wrinkled one eyebrow right down onto his cheek and raised the other one up to the roots of his hair. Egil had dark eyes, and his brows joined in the middle. This description has caused some to speculate whether Egil suffered from some bone disease causing such extreme features. This deformed medieval Icelandic skull is on display in the Settlement Museum of Borgarnes, but it isn't really Egil's skull. In a way, it is actually surprising that a man as brutally violent as him could remain so popular with modern Icelanders.
Have you ever met anyone like Egil Skallagrimsson?
No.
No, I don't think people are like that anymore.
No, thankfully.
They would be in prison then.
Yeah.
They
I
say
think
that
it's just fun to like go and look for the treasure from Egil and all of that. But
Borgarnes.
yeah. But like, I don't go like, oh my god, this guy lived here. This is so cool. I don't really.
Do you know people like that?
Yeah. All my family are like that. But it's okay.
In one disgustingly amusing story, while travelling in Norway, Egil and his friends are collecting tribute for the king, and a farmer they visit called Ormóður fails to honour them with the customary hospitality of ale, palming them off with a sort of curdled milk drink which Icelanders still enjoy today. I tried some of this sour whey drink in the settlement museum.
Skål.
It's a byproduct of making skyr.
And that's tasty. It's not bad. I could probably finish it. It tastes like what's that sour tea stuff called? Kombucha. Kombucha. Yeah.
But Egil was not impressed with the whey, especially when the farmer's daughter revealed her father had been hiding good strong beer. All Egil's men got very drunk on it, but none more so than Egil. After drinking more than his fill, the saga says, he stood up and walked across the floor to where Ormóður was sitting, seized him by the shoulders and thrust him up against a wall post. Then Egil spewed a torrent of vomit that gushed all over Ormóður's face, filling his eyes and nostrils and mouth and pouring down his chest. Ormóður was close to choking, and when he managed to let out his breath, a jet of vomit gushed out with it. Next morning, Egil went to Ormóður's bedroom, intending to kill him, but his wife and daughter pleaded for mercy. As a compromise, Egil cut off the man's beard and then gouged out one of his eyes with his finger, leaving it hanging on his cheek. What a merciful Viking Egil was. On my return to Reykjavik and the airport, I find myself reflecting on the sagas that have guided me through Iceland's stark and stunning landscapes. These tales have woven themselves into my understanding of history and mankind in ways I scarcely anticipated. They are not mere relics of a bygone age, but a living thread that connect us to the Viking spirit, its honour, its thirst for vengeance, its vitalism. For me, they've illuminated the resilience of people who carved life from this unforgiving land, showing the capacity of the Northmen to endure and create despite terrible adversity. And for heathens especially, the sagas must be treasured, for they offer vivid examples of our ethics and customs, loyalty to kin, reverence for the gods, and respect for the land. It was a privilege to trace the footsteps of those first bold settlers, to ride an Icelandic horse across the same fells and breathe the air of a landscape that feels timeless, as though it has scarcely changed since Ingolf cast his sacred pillars into the sea. To walk the rift of Thingvellir, to climb Helgafell in silence for Thor, to trace the footsteps of Egil and Eirik. This has been a pilgrimage as much as a journey. I am reminded of the words of Thomas Carlyle, who, writing in 1841, so perfectly captured the paradoxical relationship between the land and the sagas its people created. In that strange island, Iceland, burst up, the geologists say, by fire from the bottom of the sea, a wild land of barrenness and lava, swallowed many months of every year in black tempests, yet with a wild, gleaming beauty in summertime, towering up there, stern and grim, in the North Ocean, with its snow jökuls, roaring geysers, sulphur pools and horrid volcanic chasms, like the waste, chaotic battlefield of frost and fire, where, of all places, we least looked for literature or written memorials. The record of these things was written down. That such a place could birth the sagas is a testament to the indomitable spirit of the Germanic peoples, a spirit that merged with the wind and stones of this new land. I leave Iceland renewed, my heart full of joy to have trodden its saga-haunted paths and felt the pulse of its ancient tales. They will stay with me as they have stayed with this land, speaking of a past that is never truly past, but ever present in the blood and the bones of the northern peoples.